Hello everybody, it's Logan and I'm back bringing you another class guide. Today we're going to be looking at the single target god, the Arcane Mage. So far in WoD, it has undoubtedly had its moments of pure glory on fights like Butcher and Gruul. And you may already see a reoccurring pattern there between those fights, that they're entirely stationary tank and spanks from a DPS's perspective. You introduce a little bit of movement or an ability to cleave, and other classes are usually better suited. But, theoretically, as an arcane spewing beast, you have the highest capability to produce the highest DPS to any single target that you choose. So, let's jump right into it here. Now, every class tries to have a unique mechanic to it that makes it different from other classes, right? Arcane's unique trait is mana management, and that comes from your mastery. Your mastery increases the damage you do by a percentage based on the current percentage of mana available. That means if you're at 100% mana, cast an arcane spell, you'll do your normal base spell damage plus another 100% of your percentage of mastery. So we're going to try and go through this here. It's a little confusing at first, but it'll be okay. We'll get through it. So these are some numbers straight off of Icy Veins' website. They really put it together really well in breaking this down mathematically. If you have a mastery rating of 20%, for example, and you cast a spell that deals 10,000 damage even, while at 50% mana, you'll deal 11,000 damage to your target. So that's the normal 10,000 damage plus 50% from your mana available of 20% of your mastery, meaning you have a 10% increase to your initial damage. So you'll deal your spell damage plus 50% of your 20% mastery. 50% of 20 is 10%. So that's how that works. If you're still a little bit confused, don't stress about it too much. All you really need to take away from it is that the higher your mana amount is when you cast a spell, the more damage you're going to do. So that's the first unique part to Arcane Mages. Part number 2 is called Arcane Charges. Each time you cast Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, or Arcane Orb, if you talent into it, you gain an Arcane Charge. Your charges, you can hold 0 charges or up to 4 charges. The more charges, the more damage you do, and the more mana you consume. You can then dump your Arcane Charges to begin working back up to 4 with Arcane Barrage or Evocation. Evocation is not part of your actual rotation, but it's instead a cooldown that you'll use to regenerate mana, and we'll come back to Evocation later as it is a crucial part of what we're going to be doing. So, think about all that for a second. Let her soak in. We just learned that we have to keep our mana very high to do more damage, and that we want high stacks of Arcane Charges, which also increases our damage, but also greatly increases the mana costs of our spells. So how do we keep high mana and high Arcane Charges at the same time, you might wonder? Well, Arcane is a balancing act. The trick to Arcane is learning when you need to dump your charges and when not to. The best Arcane Mages are the ones who have mastered this trip across the tightrope. If your mana drops too low, it is very difficult to recover from, and if you don't use enough mana, your DPS will naturally suffer. You'll need to practice and practice this spec until you learn mana costs and how much you can get away with. But more on rotation later. Let's talk about talents. Now, Tier 1 or level 15 talents. If you've seen my Fire Mage guide, you should if you haven't already, because it's awesome. I'm kidding, I'm not actually that conceited. So if you've seen my Fire Mage guide, you know how I feel about this talent choice, because it's the same exact spells. Ice Flows is, in my opinion, undoubtedly the way to go. You get 3 charges to cast while moving. Should be a no-brainer. The others occasionally have their place, but in my opinion, not nearly like Ice Flows. So same goes for Tier 2 talents for level 30. Alter Time is generally your go-to in a raid environment. Ice Barrier is good, it's very strong, but it's on the global cooldown, so if you need to use it, in the middle of a fight, you're going to lose an entire global cooldown, and essentially it's a damage loss. If you're more comfortable with it though, and it keeps you alive, use it. Ultra Time's a little tricky, take some practice. Flame Glow is passive, so it can also be good to use if you're struggling a little bit. It's really useful for fights where there's a small amount of constant ticking damage. Beyond that, but like I said, Ultra Time is the stronger of the three, and you should be taking it. I'm taking Ice Barrier because I don't like to conform, right? Just kidding again. Level 45. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Pick whatever you want. Level 60. Two main choices here are Greater Invisibility and Cauterize. I personally prefer Greater Invisibility just because it's a better cooldown. But Cauterize is passive, and Cauterize can actually make you look better than you are because it's essentially an extra life. If you're familiar with Death Knights, it's basically Purgatory. Cauterize is good if your healers are aware of it though, because you'll basically die if they don't heal you up while you're cauterizing. Cold Snap is a thing, and you can experiment with it, but the other two are generally your go-to talents. Cold Snap, interestingly enough, can actually be a small DPS increase because it resets the cooldown of your presence of mind. That's really not a huge deal. I mean, it is a big deal. That's a couple extra casts per fight, but generally it's more important to stay alive. These two will do that more commonly, that is. Level 75 talents. These are finally our damage dealing talents. Generally, you'll be taking Supernova, as it's just superior to all of the other ones. It has 2 charges, it's instant cast, has a knock-up effect, so it can be used as an interrupt against most targets, and it hits like a freaking truck. Nether Tempest. Nether Tempest is meant to be used as a 2 to 4 target ability, so you want to keep that up on 2 to 4 targets. It works, but in my opinion, if there's a fight with constant 2 to 4 targets, for the love of all things good, learn to play Fire and switch to it for those fights. Fire is just so much better at it. Even with Nether Tempest, even though it works, Fire just will crush Arcane when you add other targets. If you're geared enough, and if you're comfortable with Fire. If not, stick with Arcane, that's fine too. Unstable Magic isn't really too good right now. So it's passive and it does work. Again, so if you're just learning, Unstable Magic is okay. But Supernova, that's where the money's at. Level 90. Choices are Rune of Power and Incanter's Flow. Rune of Power is better. It is significant, well, not significantly, but it's a reasonable amount better than Incanter's Flow. If you cannot manage to stay inside of your rune the entire time, that's when you want to take Incanter's Flow. Mirror Image is a neat, it is a pretty neat cooldown, but unlike your other 2 specs, Mirror Image is not very good. Reason being is because when you cast Mirror Images, they sit there and they spam abilities, but your clones from Mirror Images do not benefit from your mastery based on your mana amount, so it's considerably weaker than the other 2. So ignore Mirror Images while you're in Arcane, and Rune of Power and Incanter's Flow are your go-to. For level 100, 90% of the time these days we're looking at Prismatic Crystal. It's just a beast for single target, which is why we're playing Arcane after all, for single target. Arcane Orb is fun, and it's a neat thing to use, but it should only be used against multiple targets. And like I just said about Nether Tempest, if you're going to be multi-targeting frequently, just switch to your off-spec or your main spec, whatever. Fire's better for those anyway. Overpowered doesn't really get a whole lot of use. Some people argue that it's better once you're really geared with high mastery and high intellect and spell power, but generally Prismatic Crystal is just the way to go. It's better for fight mechanics. Now, Glyphs. We're getting there, guys. We'll soon be in the rotation here soon, but Glyphs. Your main glyph you should be concerned about is Glyph of Arcane Power, and it simply increases the duration of your arcane power and the cooldown by 100%. Normally 1.5 minutes, it becomes 3 minutes. Normally, I don't even know what it is, 15 seconds, now it lasts 30 seconds. There's some argument or debate as of recently about whether we should be taking this anymore. In Mist of Pandaria, it was basically a necessity, but now with Prismatic Crystal, if you don't glyph this, Arcane Power and your Prismatic Crystal line up identically every time they're off cooldown. With the glyph, you get Prismatic Crystal and Arcane Power, and then you get Prismatic Crystal, and then 1.5 minutes later, you get Prismatic Crystal and Arcane Power. There's not a whole lot of difference. I just rock with this just because I don't play Arcane too frequently. I much prefer Fire, but something to think about. The other two, doesn't really matter. I'm using Glyph of Rapid Displacement, gives me an extra charge of Blink, and Glyph of Slow, so my Arcane Blast applies as slow. I think I recently switched to Arcane for Flamebender Kagraz in Blackrock Foundry, and this slow was very useful for kiting the wolves around from range. Minor Glyph, Glyph of Momentum, teleports you in a direction when you use Blink, direction you're moving rather than the direction you're facing. You can also look at Arcane Explosion, which increases the radius of your Arcane Explosion by 5 yards, and Cone of Cold, which increases the damage done by 200%. If you're doing a lot of ad type stuff, dealing with a lot of ads, these two you definitely probably want to use these two, especially this one, above all others. Okay, that pretty much covers it for Glyphs and Talents. Okay, let's talk stats here. Stats are probably pretty easy to guess. Obviously, we want Intellect and Spell Power. Those are the obvious ones. After that, as far as secondary stats are concerned, we want as much Mastery as possible. Mastery simply makes us do more damage, like we discussed earlier on in the guide. Our second best secondary stat is Haste. Haste makes us cast more spells, makes us generate charges quicker, Arcane Missiles, channel faster, and it makes us regenerate mana at a higher rate. After that, we want Multi-Strike and Critical Strike, and then finally Versatility being our worst stat. Let's move into single target rotation, shall we? Like we said before, we want to manage our mana and our arcane charges. Our main spell that we're going to be casting most frequently is Arcane Blast. Its damage is increased by 50% per charge, and mana cost is increased by 100% per charge, so it gets really costly as you use it. When you decide you'll get too low on mana, and if you cast another Arcane Blast, you'll need to use Arcane Barrage to dump your arcane charges. A general rule of thumb to remember is don't cast another Arcane Blast if you're below 90% when the spell reaches the end of its cast. That means you want to kind of hover around the 90% mark. If you are at 91% and you get an Arcane Blast off, which is perfectly fine, that's a good thing to do. 91% is a very solid mana amount. You're probably not going to have enough time in your next cast of Arcane Blast to get back to 90% again. So cast at 91%, Arcane Barrage, get rid of your charges, and then start building back up towards 4 charges with Arcane Blast. Something else, another ability we have is called Arcane Missiles. Arcane Missiles is a proc that has a chance to come up after each damage dealing spell is cast. You can store up to 3 charges. Each charge costs 0 mana, has a channel time, and benefits from your mastery and arcane charges. This is a godsend to Arcane. With proper use of your Arcane Missiles, provided you're lucky enough to get them to proc, you can stay at a higher amount of mana for a longer period of time and do more damage. Now, you only want to use Arcane Missiles when you're at 4 charges. It's a DPS loss if you use it before that. You also only want to use it, if you're not at 4 charges and you are at 3 charges of Arcane Missile, you are risking potentially wasting gaining another stack. So if you're only at 2 charges and Arcane Missiles pops up and you have 3 of them sitting there, you want to use 1 just to get rid of it. And that will generate a stack of Arcane Charge, so keep that in mind. So let's have a look here. Let's see if I can get my stuff rolling here. So I'm going to get my Rune of Power down. So we're going to start off with a cast of Arcane Blast. Oh, there's an Arcane Missile proc, and here is an Arcane Charge I have here in my UI. 2 charges, another stack of that. Man, we're getting all kinds of lucky. So now you can see we're at 4 Arcane Charges here, casting Arcane Missiles. Now what I'm doing here is I'm kind of weaving in my Arcane Blast and my Arcane Missiles. That allows me to stay at a higher mana amount longer. Now, that's pretty much it. That's why a lot of people get bored playing Arcane. Now me talking here and trying to do this all at one time, I'm not focusing very much on my mana amount, but I think you might get the idea here soon. Getting really fortunate with Arcane Missiles here though, man oh man. So now I'm right around here, probably shouldn't cast this one, but so now we're going to cast Arcane Barrage, remove the charges. Now we're building back up towards full charges again. See how this works? Gonna reach 4 charges, Arcane Missiles, Arcane Barrage, working back up. That's pretty much it for single target. Now, I know you're probably like, well, you haven't used Supernova yet. You need to use Supernova in there. Well, we're gonna get there, so relax. Leave combat. Now, we're gonna talk about Supernova with our burst, because I think it's better to go through it that way. Our burst revolves largely around proper use of our prismatic crystal. When we use prismatic crystal, if you've played another mage class, you've seen it before. Prismatic crystal down here, you want to place this near your target, so like, you know, somewhere around here. Before you use it, you want to make sure you have both charges of Supernova, because remember, they're instant cast and they hit very hard. You want both charges of Supernova. You want to be at 4 Arcane charges, and if you can, you certainly want to be at a reasonably high amount of mana. Because what we're going to do when we put this down is we're going to go balls to the wall. We're going to burn everything we can in the window of time that we have while Arcane is present, or while Prismatic Crystal is present. So, you want to try and get back to reasonably high mana, conserve your Supernova for a few seconds so both charges are available. And when you drop your crystal, while the global cooldown is turning, so you're going to put it down, it's going to go on your GCD. While it's on global cooldown, you want to use your Arcane Power. Arcane Power makes you do 20% more spell damage and reduces the cost of your spells by 10%. This is your cooldown. This is your DPS cooldown. Arcane Power is huge. So drop the crystal, use Arcane Power, and now you want to spam all your abilities. Now, not just recklessly. You can't just recklessly spam stuff. That's not a good idea. You want to usually lead off, depending on your mana amount, with Supernova. Then you want to weave in an Arcane Blast. If you have Arcane Missiles, use those as well. The entire idea is to get as many spells into your Prismatic Crystal as possible. If you can, you want to maintain a high amount of mana in that time so you do even more damage to it. So that means, like I was kind of saying earlier, if you have 2 charges of Arcane Missiles when you drop your crystal, cast an Arcane Blast, cast an Arcane Missile, cast an Arcane Blast. Make sure you use both of your Supernova charges in that time. And right before your crystal's about to expire, you want some form of a timer. If you use ELVUI like I do, it'll come up. Mine's down here. It shows me the time remaining on my Prismatic Crystal. Right before it's about to expire, if you don't think you can have enough time to get a full cast off of Arcane Blast, we have an ability called Presence of Mind. It's on a 1.5 minute cooldown. Causes your next mage spell to be instant. Does not apply to portal or teleport spells. Who cares? What we're going to use, or what we're going to do, is we're going to use Presence of Mind and get an instant cast Arcane Blast off at the very last second. Arcane Blast does not have a spell travel time, so it's instant basically. As soon as you use it, it hits the target. So, that's how you use Prismatic Crystal. Generally, you're going to be taking, well, not generally, you can do whatever you want, but there's Arcane Mages have 2 phases called a burn and conserve phase. When you use Prismatic Crystal, that's basically your burn phase. What that means is we completely disregard our mana usage. We want to try and keep it high, but we're not using Arcane Barrage. We're not dumping our charges, so we're going to lose mana quick. So we're going to go about our basic rotation here. I'm going to try doing this. We'll see if I can get this to go right without screwing it up. Rune of Power down. Make sure our buffs are on. I'm going to use my crystal here. Now, Arcane Blast, Heroism. Getting this up. 4 charges. Use both casts of that. Try not to cap. That's bad. Watching the timer down here. Gonna get one more. Boom. Switching targets. Now we're burning. See how I'm weaving here with these charges. Want to keep going. I'm watching my arcane power and my time warp here. Come on, there we go. That's what I wanted. Now I'm gonna get one more in and use Evocation. Boom, 100% mana. Now we're going to talk about that now. And then you go back to your conserve phase, and I quote conserve, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to stay at high mana. This is the whole weaving thing I'm talking about here. And also I apologize for my key mashing. It's just the hardware that I have available to me right now. Boom, Arcane Barrage, start back over again. That's not too bad for having no mastery buff, no food, no potion. Okay, let's talk about Evocation. Evocation, we just used here, gains 20% of your total mana instantly when you use it, and another 60%, well, I guess we have charges here. It changes based on the number of charges you have. So you see how it was 60% and now it's 30%? When you're going through your burn phase, like I said, you never ever want to use Arcane Barrage and dump your charges. So you're going to have, when you reach like 50 or 60%, which is about when you want to use Evocation, when you reach that amount, you're going to have all your charges, you're going to pop that, and you're instantly going to jump back up to like 85% mana. Or somewhere around there. You're going to let it tick one time, because it's not steady, it's not linear. You generated an instant amount, and then it ticks a couple times. So you want to let it tick one time, and then you want to cancel it, and then go back to your conserve phase. So that's how it works. Fortunately for us, it's a 1.5 minute cooldown, which conveniently lines up with our Prismatic Crystal. That's your burst. That's your burst and your conserve phase. You want to do this. It's going to take some practice, especially with the whole Prismatic Crystal, because you got to work on getting your charges up, work on correctly managing your mana amount in that time, getting as many spells onto the crystal as possible, and then switching targets back. Because remember, you have to switch back. Because you auto-target Prismatic Crystal, when it expires, you got to switch back to your target. So a side note on Supernova, which is, remember, our talent, our level 75 talent. You should definitely be aware of a couple things with Supernova. Supernova does not benefit from your arcane charges, but it does benefit from your mastery. So that means it doesn't matter how many charges you're at. If you're at high mastery, Supernova is going to do a lot of damage. Or if you're at high mana, if you're at low mana, you're going to do a little amount of damage. So keep that in mind. It can also proc your Arcane Missiles. So you don't really want to cast, if you're at 3 charges of Arcane Missiles, if you cast Supernova, you risk wasting a charge you could be generating with your Arcane, or with your Supernova. So cast Arcane Missiles to get down to 2, then cast Supernova. Also, you want to make sure you use both of them during your Prismatic Crystal. And one more thing I almost forgot to mention about Supernova. You don't want a mana cap when you use it. Since it costs no mana, you can risk reaching 100% mana during the global cooldown after using Supernova. That's pretty much it on Supernova. Again, just like everything else, it's going to take some practice, and you'll need to work with it, because it's all about timing. The rotation for Arcane is simple. It's easy as pie. You've essentially got 3 buttons plus a talent, plus 2 talents, really. Supernova and Prismatic Crystal. It's managing those things efficiently that takes practice, and it's a quick thing. But you have to figure that out on your own. There's some things that you just can't teach. So let's look at macros. Arcane Mages actually kind of need macros for the most part. They're pretty simple, they're pretty basic, but they all revolve around the same idea. And that idea is do not cancel your channel of Arcane Missiles. So if you're channeling Arcane Missiles and you want to, like I was saying earlier, weave in an Arcane Blast right after one, if you're halfway through your cast of Arcane Missiles and start spamming Arcane Blast, you'll cancel it. You don't want to do that. So I have these macros here. You can see the basic idea. Like here's, for example, Arcane Barrage. If you're casting Arcane Missiles, it's going to check to make sure you're not channeling, and then it's going to cast Arcane Barrage. Same goes for Supernova. My Arcane Blast one's a little bit different. This is like my cancelaura button and my make sure I'm not channeling. So it cancels my ice block. If I ice block, I push Arcane Blast, it's going to cancel it and start casting Arcane Blast. Same goes for Invisibility, Slow Fall, and Evocation. Remember, I said you want to let this Evocation tick one time. This is how you stop it. You're channeling it, you tick once, you start casting Arcane Blast, it stops Evocation, and you go about your business. So, that's pretty much it. Oh, also, I have Ice Block. If you're casting something and you want to cast Ice Block, boom, stops casting, cast Ice Block can be a major, can literally save your life. Presence of Mind, I have macroed together Presence of Mind and Arcane Blast. This is for our burst on our Prismatic Crystal. I'm going to have all of the macros that I just showed you here. So for Arcane Barrage, Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, I forgot to show you that one too. That's so you don't overwrite another Arcane Missiles with another one, or with the one you're currently casting. I'll post all of these in the video description, so be sure if you want to just copy and paste them into your own spell book, be my guest. That's why they're there. So for mass AoE and trash, when it gets to the point where there's so many mobs that you don't know what to do, you have two buttons: Cone of Cold and Arcane Explosion. What you do is, you gotta man up, get in melee range, stand in the middle of the chaos, use Cone of Cold on cooldown, and spam the living crap out of your Arcane Explosion. That's it. That's all you got. Your damage potentially will suck, but such is the life of an Arcane Mage. If you can, remember to apply the Glyphs if you know you're going to be doing a lot of that kind of trash fighting. Put your Glyphs in for Arcane Explosion and for Cone of Cold. You'll thank yourself later. So now, everyone's favorite part, the user interface. Mine's pretty simple here. It's pretty straightforward. If you haven't seen my guide on this channel about how to get your ELV UI to the same as mine, you should check out my guide. It's a video I just put up not too long ago on this channel called How to ELV UI. All I'm using here on my mage for Arcane is ELV UI and Tell Me When. This is it. This is my Tell Me When stuff. If you have seen my guide, you'll see some things that are a little different. Like I said in the guide, I'm changing it all the time, constantly trying to get it better. I have a couple things here that are exclusive to Fire, since I play both specs, mostly Fire. So you'll just have to ignore these, that being Blast Wave, Meteor, etc. So right here, what we've got, this is my Ring Enchant. This guy right here, Ring Enchant. This is the Weapon Enchantment. Over here, we have the Critical Strike Trinket from Ore Gorger and the Multi-Strike Trinket from Blackhand. Down here on this row, we've got Supernova. That lets me know when my Supernova is off cooldown and how many charges of it I have. That makes it easier to keep track of things I'm doing when I'm trying to build up for a burst phase during Prismatic Crystal. This one here is for Arcane Power. When it is off of cooldown and ready to use, this will light up, or well, it'll just show up. I'll see it here. This is just a little one for Amplify Magic that shows me when it's up and running. So when I use Amplify Magic, that'll appear. Presence of Mind works the same way as Arcane Power. When it's available, I'll be able to see it. Same goes for Prismatic Crystal. So these down here are just to show when things are available without having to take my eyes too far from the center of my screen down to my bars and look for stuff that might or might not be off of cooldown yet. These two are for fire. This is my Rune of Power one. When I'm talented into Rune of Power, if I'm not standing in Rune of Power, this will light up. When I am, this disappears. So mid-fight, if I have my Rune of Power here, and I'm in the middle of the fight and I had to move out here for something, this will pop up. When I move back into it, this will disappear. Pretty simple. If you're going to use Rune of Power, I really recommend that because it can really screw you over if you think you're on the edge and you're not. The most important thing here out of all of these is this guy right here. This is simply something that tracks the amount of mana that I have available numerically in percentages. You can use this down here that comes with ELV-UI. That's perfectly fine too. I find this much easier to use. I'm sure you saw it earlier when I'm using this. Get into combat here. It shows me an exact percentage amount that I've got to work with. So it really helps for managing your mana. And as we've sort of talked about earlier, Arcane is all about your mana management. So you really want to make sure you know exactly where you're at with your mana. In all honesty, that pretty much is it, everybody. That's an Arcane Mage. Well, I guess before we really quit here, these two up here, Ice Flows and Aspect of the Fox, this just shows whenever I cast Ice Flows, I make sure that I'm on it so I'm not canceling casts. Not super essential, but a little quality of life improvement. Same for this. For Aspect of the Fox, if you're not calling it out in raid or anything like that, when someone uses Aspect of the Fox, this pops up and I can see it and I can walk all over the place and cast. Now we're done. So that's it for this guide, everybody. I hope you've all learned something and this video wasn't too long. So I really was trying to shorten it, make it shorter than the last few. The last few really got away from me. Be sure to like or dislike this video, and if you'd like to see more of these videos, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also, as of very recently, Iron Star Gaming, that's us, is now on social media and on, social media being Twitter and Facebook. Links are also in the description, so be sure to check us out there. So that's it for today. So until next time, I'll see y'all later.